I call the member for Orange to move his motion.
Yes, thank you, Mr Speaker, and I move that this House, 1, notes and acknowledges the importance of TAFE education and training in regional New South Wales, and 2, notes the change in opportunities for regionally based students to access TAFE courses. Mr Speaker, I think we can all agree that TAFE has played an essential and integral role in the vocational education and training of our workforce, particularly in rural and regional New South Wales. Many of us here in this chamber may have been previous graduates of TAFE at some point. I know I was as well. I see the member for Tweed putting his hand up. TAFE provided a world-class vocational training facility for students and apprentices over many decades and played a pivotal role in upskilling, teaching and building our state. There is an endless number of trade services we all rely on in our society, both in the country and here in the city. In turn, businesses which deliver those services to us are also reliant upon the confidence in a quality-assured technical and further education, which their apprentices and staff can reliably access to help deliver their services to us. Out in the country, there is presently a huge skills and trade shortage. Businesses are hobbled as a result. The future growth and prosperity of our country towns hinges on available trade services. TAFE is a vital element in developing a skilled workforce to underpin the growth and prosperity in the regions. I've often spoken about the challenges we face out in the country, and the centralisation of our government services is draining the vitality and viability as businesses follow suit. TAFE is a perfect example of an organisation the New South Wales Government have centralised, which has been further skeletonised as cost-cutting has slowly but surely reduced the variety and number of courses being offered, and the staff cuts, which have not only reduced the organisation's capability to deliver timely and quality education and training. There is obvious effect to the organisation's reduced capabilities, but the staff cuts and increases in minimum class sizes have caused enormous pressure on TAFE teachers and the trainer workforce, who are being asked to do more with less. Administrative staff are diminished and therefore less support for frontline educators. Teachers are doing enormous hours, and the feedback I've received is that some are working hundreds of hours overtime per year just to try and keep up, and so much so that they're being burnt out. Teachers are being burdened with compliance requirements which far exceed that required of private training providers. A recent staff survey undertaken by TAFE resulted in 1/3 of employees reporting they're happy in their job, and 1/3 of the respondents also reporting that they had confidence in their employer. Naturally, we're now seeing TAFE teachers walking away from their job, worsening an already dire situation which is having an impact on courses. And whilst I'm not shocked to have learned that overseas companies have been contracted to write, deliver and assess TAFE course material, and as a patriotic Aussie who puts our country first, I'm disappointed to hear that. TAFE long held a reputation for the gold standard in technical and further education throughout New South Wales. Unfortunately, that could not be said of the organisation now, which has been eroded, cut to the bare bones, especially in the bush. That's right. As I briefly mentioned earlier, in the bush we are burdened with challenges not faced by those in the city. In many communities, we do not have access to public transport, which is an impediment for many in accessing employment and educational opportunities. And as a result, many young country folk may be challenged to realise their professional and financial potential. And for some, it will be a case of the poor getting poorer. Many young people do not have the money to purchase a vehicle to travel the vast distances to access TAFE education and training. Those that are lucky enough to have one are driving long distances, day and night, to attend TAFE and cannot afford overnight accommodation in the distant centres which offer the training. Therefore, they're driving fatigued and dodging the kangaroos and other wildlife on the road. And the cost of fuel is a huge impost to a financially challenged young person or those who are unemployed in travelling to access trade-based education such as TAFE. We are now in the digital age, and many organisations see potential efficiencies and read that to mean cost cuts the digital platform may deliver. I say may because, paradoxically, in rural and regional New South Wales, many people do not have access to reliable digital or mobile connectivity which their city cousins benefit from, which is an inequity and a disadvantage for country people being able to access education and training. A large proportion of the remaining courses on offer are delivered off campus or by a virtual classroom. And as I've pointed out, While this is good for those that do not require face-to-face training or hands-on education and have the good fortune to own a laptop or a tablet and access to reliable internet service, there are many who do not. I've previously touched on the increase in minimum class sizes brought about due to, and I quote, efficiency measures. However, what we're now seeing is that when the minimum class size is 18 is not met, the class or course is removed as an offering and the other 17 applicant students are left without an option, which might also mean they're left without a job. Some school leavers are hands-on practical students, especially farm country kids from the bush, and a trade provides a magnificent career pathway for young individuals. Working for yourself, be able to work remotely or work anywhere around the world, and with the added bonus of not having a HECS debt when you finish university.
That's because
The-
of our free courses.
The benefits of a skilled, the benefits of a trade
Apprenticeships.
is magnificent in terms of the career progression it can provide and the prosperity it can provide for many of our young farm or country children or school leavers. We cannot have growth without trade-based services, and we cannot have trade-based services without business, and we cannot have businesses without skilled workers, and we cannot have skilled workers without TAFE education and training. And I cannot put it any simpler than that. I note that there are students who have to drive several hundred kilometres to access TAFE. Metal engineering is one such course that's not offered in the Central West, and I have many metal engineering and fabricating companies approaching me and saying, well, where can we send there's nothing locally to send our students to TAFE. They have to go to Sydney at great inconvenience to those students and impost to the companies. For those reasons, I commend the motion to the House.
Mr Assistant Speaker.
Thank the member. I call the member for Tweed.
Thank you, Mr Assistant Speaker. Mr Assistant Speaker, I rise to make a contribution, and I think TAFE is very important, and I think I need to be upfront with you, Mr Assistant Speaker. I'm a graduate of TAFE in cookery and chef's things and that.
Is that just between you and me?
Started at East Sydney and then went out to Ryde, so yeah.
Right category.
I won't
And
tell anyone.
actually, I went on to actually being a TAFE teacher out at Padstow, so I'm fully aware. Look, TAFE is a magnificent organisation. I mean, the New South Wales government delivered a record $1.9 billion budget for this year. TAFE teachers have increased every year since 2016. Last 12 months, there was 1,550 students living in regional areas involved in TAFE. This is not right. I'll acknowledge the interjection from the member of Newcastle. I have sat here for so long and to see him put down TAFE. He is such a negative individual. I'm just shocked at the way he criticises the poor TAFE teachers, the poor students. I can tell you now that TAFE New South Wales is Australia's largest and best training provider, helping people get their skills they need for jobs. We delivered 100,000 free apprenticeships, 70,000 free traineeships to help people get their first jobs. Now, in my area, my TAFE enrolments have increased. That's why when Labor comes to town, they don't come up and protest about TAFE cuts in front of my TAFE because they know it's a fabrication in my area. My apprenticeships are up 30%. 30%. So you show your face up there and we'll laugh at you because what you're peddling is lies and misinformation.
And the fact that contribute through the chair, the member for Newcastle will be mindful of Standing Order 249A. Please.
Thank you. Currently, we're building a $19 million vet course at Tweed River High. How good is that? That's going to allow students with a large number of industries coming through. And guess what our TAFE did, Mr Assistant Speaker? Newcastle didn't do this. We had an evacuation centre. So most nights we were sleeping up to 600 people, quickly turned over in the TAFE. A lot of the teachers, a lot of the students came up there to volunteer. And we're also, the variety of courses we're offering there. Our EN courses are oversubscribed. Our social media and media courses are oversubscribed. And guess what? We're actually running courses now on surfboard shaping. That is a Cert 3 course there. So we're encouraging locals to do it. And the most amazing thing happens in the Tweed. TAFE in our state charges actually more than Queensland's TAFE. All right, they charge a bit more, but our enrolments are up and theirs is down. Why? Because we provide a quality product. A quality product for teachers, a quality product for students. It's all about looking after the students and the chippies, the carpentry, the engineering. We even have courses running for movie makeup.
Member for Tweed, yeah, stop the clock, please.
Mr. Assistant Speaker, the member...
Sorry. Let's just slow it down. Member for Oxley on a point of order.
Mr. Assistant Speaker, I'm having trouble hearing the incredibly proud contribution from the member for Tweed. He's making a very excellent case for the motion here today, and sometimes I'm having trouble hearing him over the member for Newcastle. I ask you bring him forward.
Member Foxley, I will uphold your well-embellished point of order. Member for Newcastle will come to order. And I did reference 2498. I'll go through this each time. It's the mechanism I will use. It may not be putting you out for a vote, but it certainly will move you out to calm down and allow the member to continue unassisted from the other side. Please, member for Tweed.
Thank you, Mr. for your good ruling. Importantly, TAFE worked incredibly hard to make sure classes returned as soon as possible once the floodwater subsided, because TAFE New South Wales is a critical part of my region and the whole of regional New South Wales. There will be the need to train tradies and apprenticeships who will rebuild our region and help us recover for our flood. I'm very proud of our TAFE College, the Kingscliff TAFE, the incredible jobs they continue to do, not only in the education, but as I said before, in assisting during the evacuation, in assisting looking after those people displaced during the amount of floods. And I see it just growing in strength and strength. I was a TAFE teacher back in the mid-80s, Mr. Assistant Speaker. I know what there was then, and I know what there is there now, and I'm incredibly proud to support the TAFE, particularly in our regions, because it is showing the leadership and it is showing the strength building of our local communities. And all of us in regions, we need tradesmen. Doesn't matter whether you're in Broken Hill or you're in Orange or you're in Tweed Heads, there is a lack of trades, and to see them all going through in their courses and all proud to do their courses. They're proud, they're turning up day after day and getting their qualifications, and I think there's nothing better than to see lots of trades and a lot of courses and people completing them and doing extra courses to enhance their capabilities. So look, I thoroughly endorse this. I dismiss the negativity, the continual negativity that I hear in this chamber about our TAFE. I'm proud of TAFE and I continue to support them.
I call the member for Bowen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The skills shortage in Australia has reached a critical point. On my travels across my electorate, I'm often told by people that they just can't get hospitality staff or tradespeople or other kinds of skilled workers. While I know this problem is much more widespread than just my electorate, it is particularly acute in Barwon. This is because of the deterioration of TAFE services across Western New South Wales. Funding has been cut, the schools restructured or forced to compete with private colleges for funding, and as a result, courses that were once the mainstay of trades in country towns are no longer offered. Teachers are overworked, they have to spend too much time on admin, working long hours, and morale is low. It's a sad state of affairs given TAFE's proud heritage of providing education. Before technical colleges existed, it had been a tradition for one generation to pass on its skills to the next. A craftsman father would pass on his knowledge to his sons or an apprentice, or a mother skilled in a range of areas to her daughters. But as communities grew larger, societies became more complex, creating a bigger demand for skilled tradespeople during the Industrial Revolution. Much of that training was often given over to outside institutions. In 1799, British academic, physician and philanthropist Dr. George Birkbeck began giving free lectures to working men in Glasgow in an effort to improve their knowledge of the mechanics of centrifugal pumps. It led to the setting up of the Mechanic Institutes and School of Arts across Britain and in Australia. Tasmania led the way with its... Certainly did. Tasmania led the way with its Mechanics Institute established in 1827, and in 1833 the Sydney Mechanics School of Arts was open. Originally most were set up or supported by money from philanthropic businessmen as places where working class people could go and learn new skills. Over time, the government became more involved, granting land to these schools as well as funding them, importing experts from England to teach, and setting up new schools. By the 20th century, many had become an essential part of the government education system. They later became known as technical colleges and played a significant role in Australia's history, building our cities and our industries. During World War II, these schools were vital for training people for the war effort. They became institutes of technical and further education, or TAFEs, in the 1970s, training generations of young people in trades and various professions. But in recent times, various measures have led to a decline in TAFE colleges across the state, particularly in Barwon. In the far west, the biggest issue is the travel required for apprentices to complete their theory for their qualification. Many TAFEs no longer offer the full range of more traditional trade courses, such as carpentry, joinery and electrical trades, at TAFE Western for face-to-face learning. It does really depend on the trade. We've been contacted by constituents who travel from Broken Hill to Dubbo, that's 750 k's, for their apprenticeship theory in spray painting. This is at their own expense, and their employer is also without their apprentice while they travel to attend these course requirements. TAFE Western locally flies staff in to teach the building and electrical courses when there is a full course. At the moment, there are courses running on metal fabrication and boiler making, but ironically, they do not have enough apprentices to fill these classes. To complete a plumbing apprenticeship in Broken Hill, it requires students to travel 300 kilometres to Mildura, again at their own expense, forcing them to take time away from their work at the cost of the employer. Add to this the fact that the apprentices are on a comparatively low wage when they start their apprenticeship, which isn't making it attractive to enter the trades. Teaching shortages are also having an impact on what is offered in Broken Hill. Hairdressing and beauty students need to go 500 kilometres to Adelaide for trade schools. There are similar problems with travel in other parts of the electorate. In Cobar, there is a new connected learning centre, which has replaced the older TAFE and is further away from the CBD, which offers a range of courses including cooking, floristry, hospitality, shearing and wood harvesting. But for courses on many of the trades, students need to travel to Dubbo. For several students with a disability in Condobolin, the hospitality course they want to take is only offered as an online course. But a mother of a student wrote to us saying, online learning is not a suitable learning experience. Some of our people need to be kept motivated and engaged. Our people need the full learning experience to gain the maximum benefits. Some of those students either don't have a computer or have problems with internet connectivity. Narrabri has a fully functioning TAFE, but because many of the courses are not offered locally, there are stories of people who have to travel from Narrabri to Tamworth. Due to the way the courses are structured, it often means the students are travelling weekly just for one day of learning. It's up to 4 years, Mr. Speaker. So they're still forced to find another way to get to TAFE. Often students need to go the night before, or they have to be up for an early start. That is costing them money for fuel, accommodation and food. The reimbursement they receive for accommodation and travel is not adequate. It's not even enough to cover their expenses. At a time when people are desperate for skilled workers, we should be doing everything we can to encourage people to take up apprenticeships and studying to enter the workforce. But our proud heritage of educating our youth, passing on skills to the next generation, is in danger of being lost. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank the member. I call the member for Northern Tablelands.
Thank you, Mr. Assistant Speaker. I rise to make a contribution on the public interest debate, and at the outset I want to thank the member for Orange for bringing this motion before the House today and acknowledge his very sincere and genuine interest in technical and further education, and also his colleague, the member for Barwon, for a wonderful history lesson about how TAFE began in New South Wales and the importance of it across rural and regional New South Wales. Indeed, of any training provider, registered training provider in Australia, TAFE New South Wales has the largest physical footprint, student numbers, teacher numbers of any training provider anywhere in Australia. And I think that is something to be celebrated and to be supported. In the member's motion, point 2 is to note the change in opportunities for regionally based students to access TAFE courses. And that's something I want to touch on in my brief contribution. In the Northern Tablelands, we have 4 TAFE campuses and very proud to have them. And a couple of years ago, the community and the agricultural industry identified a significant skills shortage in shearers, something that is not unique to the Northern Tablelands. The Central West, southern parts of New South Wales would be the same. For many, many decades, we have been heavily reliant on New Zealand shearers to come into our country to shear a flock, and actually COVID-19 highlighted the structural weakness in the wool industry of relying heavily on overseas shearers when we should be investing more in growing and developing our own. And so a group of farmers contacted myself And then we formed a bit of a working group with Regional Development Australia Northern Inland, TAFE New South Wales, a number of local high schools, and together we developed the Glen Innes Shearing School, utilising the facilities of the Department of Primary Industries and their wonderful 6-stand wool shed. We've now been running for the last 3 years by shearing schools twice a year, where we have around 40 high school students that come in for a fortnight. TAFE teachers are there, wool producers are there, Australian Wool Innovation have now come on board and they do wool classing as well, so that the students actually get a bit of a taste, and then they get offered places to do wool classing at TAFE New South Wales. And I can say after 3 years, we've turned out already more than 30 local wool classes in our region that are working within our region. And we've got a number of shearers that are actually working full-time as shearers as a result. Some of those, I can say, are not young people that come from farms. They're not people that have had anything to do with the wool industry. Their first introduction to wool classing or shearing was through that shearing school, through the partnership with TAFE New South Wales. And now they are working in that industry. The young people love it. Our agricultural industry loves it. And I think that's an important change where we've now got in our region a group of teachers and campus managers that are really keen to, I guess, work in a bespoke way to address skills shortages in our region. And if we have the quantum, and that is the demand or the interest in that particular skill set or course, then we can find a way to make it happen. And look, I just think it's a great model that I certainly would like to see rolled out right across the state. As long as you've got the facilities, you'll get no shortage of school students. As long as you've got the willingness of industry involved, it can be a success. And I think after 3 years, the results speak for themselves. And even during the height of the pandemic, we were still able to run the shearing school. I don't know if we did abide by all of the restrictions of the time, but look, skills needs need to be addressed, and so we did that, and everyone was safe in the end. So again, I want to finish where I started and thank the member for Orange for bringing this motion forward. It is indeed a changing landscape in the skills space. We've seen connected learning centres, for example, come on board, and in my area, they've more than tripled the number of courses that we now have available locally in our communities that we couldn't deliver in our local, particularly smaller communities beforehand. And as I said, the shearing school at Glen Innes is just one example of the bespoke way that TAFE, certainly in the Northern Tablelands, which is all I can speak to in this debate, works now, and our region is all the better for it. So again, thank you to the member for Orange.
Mr. Speaker.
Well done.
It's a good contest, gentlemen, but for good behaviour, I'm going to call the member for Newcastle.
Thank you very much.
I've been very good for the last couple of contributions.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, the member for Tablelands here was talking about the fantastic model of the coalition. The model of the coalition, well, that model is, if you don't believe in public provision of vocational education, this is what you do. This is the model. First of all, you sack the staff. You sack a third of the staff in TAFE since this coalition government's been in. A third of the staff. What happens then? The enrolments go down. So the enrolments go down, they go right down. And then what happens after that? What happens after that? They close the courses. They shut the courses down. Shut the courses down, that's the next step. And then what do? What do? They sell off the campus. They sell the campus, and that's the coalition's model. For those that don't believe in the public provision of vocational education. And if you sell the campus, you ain't got no access to TAFE in regional New South Wales. In fact, last year we saw the regional Scone TAFE campus flogged off in favour of private investments and a glorified computer lab put in town. The minister said it's going to be a fully functioning, catering the more face-to-face and practical courses. The campus would remain. In March, the Education Department Secretary said there were no divestment plans. By August, Racing New South Wales expressed an interest in the site, and What happens? What happens? The divestment's approved. When's it approved? The very same day. The very same day. But look, this isn't the only campus in regional New South Wales this government's flogged. In fact, in September 20, they said, yeah, let's sell 19 campuses. 19 campuses. Hey, 19. This is a great model. Since then, they've sold off 2 campuses. 2 campuses. 2 regional campuses. Mudgee number 1 and Goulburn number 2. And here we have a motion by the crossbenchers on TAFE in the regions. Well, this government loves flogging them off. And courses, let's talk about course access. The member for Tweed, he was talking about rebuilding after the floods. Well, I wonder how they're going to do it, because you cannot study bricklaying, floor wall tiling between Newcastle and Queensland. Can you believe that? With the destruction of the floods and the need for skilled tradesperson in this region, absolutely beggars belief. Absolutely beggars belief. The only place you can study a Certificate 3 in walk and floor tiling outside Greater Sydney are Newcastle and Bathurst. When all those courses were cut on the North and Mid-North Coast, I heard the story of a bricklaying apprentice in his 2nd year who had to travel to Newcastle from Coffs Harbour to complete his studies. Well, congratulations to the Coalition, great believer in regional TAFE campuses. He was a P-plater who had to get up at 3 a.m, do the drive, go to TAFE, then drive back home. That's very unsafe, very unsafe. Now, there was a trades hub put in Coffs Harbour, but it wasn't even big enough to accommodate all the students that have been enrolled at the Coffs Harbour TAFE campus. Meanwhile, in Bega, Connected Learning Centres opened. The community was pretty concerned about that and what it meant for the campus on Barrack Street. And as history has shown us, you get a CLC, and that's what they did. You can kiss your campus goodbye. Clearly they were onto something, because the government decided to build a trade hub right next door. Right next door. And if you look at staff and the access to regional TAFE in New South Wales, the decimation of and reduced access to TAFE is absolutely clear in staff members. 1/3 of staff members cut under this coalition. 1/3. And you know, that's the number that's gone from Ballina, 2/3 from Broken Hill, and Cessnock and Gunnedah, and how many from Maclean? Just a casual 90%. 90% of the staff. How are you going to run a regional TAFE with 90% gone? Hey? How are you going to do it? And Western Region councillors, at the moment, a huge part of accessing education at TAFE is able to actually get the wraparound services as well. But right now we've got tranche 2 of the cuts happening. We've got the libraries, assistance for people with disabilities, counselling services, and there are big concerns about the Western Region cuts to counsellors. That's what we get from this government. Cuts, cuts, cuts. Cutting the wraparound services, cutting the teachers, student numbers go down, cut the courses, sell the campus. Great model, great model.
I call the member for Wagga Wagga.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I thank the member for Orange for bringing this motion, because the issue of labour and skills shortages in rural and regional New South Wales is becoming critical, and a strong regional TAFE is an important part of solving that issue. Now, let me start by pointing out that a National Skills Commission survey showed that in 2020, it was the first year that employers in regional areas had more difficulty recruiting staff than employers in capital cities. In June last year, Regional Development Australia Riverina released their Riverina Skills Study, and it showed that 78% of respondents reported difficulty recruiting staff, and nearly 50% of vacancies were unfilled. And importantly, nearly 3/4 of respondents felt that skills would change in the next 5 years, leading to a need to re-skill our workforce. The top industries with vacancies included accommodation and food services, agriculture, forestry and fishing, healthcare and social assistance, manufacturing and professional, scientific and technical services. And these concerns were reinforced in the 2022 Business Summit hosted in Wagga Wagga this year by the Committee for Wagga in April. And they pointed out, there's a lot of discussion there, and they pointed out that shortages of labour and skills were absolutely the limiting factor in the development of the region. And an important part of addressing those skills was the need to provide strong local pathways for training and retraining, especially through the vocational education sector. Now, in 2012, there were 156,000 people in apprenticeships or traineeships in New South Wales. This was just 85,000 in 2020. Now, it did go up to 106,000 in 2021, but nevertheless, this means a remarkable drop in those accessing a career in trades. We are not training enough in the skills we need. So often, we are not encouraging our young people to look at the enormous potential of a career in the trades. And so we need to encourage families and our communities to look at these options. But we also need to make sure we have attractive and relevant training in our regions. And that is where we need a strong modern regional TAFE. Now let me give you an example. Computer numerical control machines are playing an increasingly important role in manufacturing, and these computer-controlled machines provide a level of efficiency, accuracy and consistency that would be difficult to achieve in a manual process. Now there's a company in Wagga called Flipscreen using this technology to make innovative recycling equipment, and that's been invented, engineered, commercialised and now exported from Wagga Wagga all over the world. The machines are recognised as the best in the world and are exported there from the Riverina. And they're actually creating a 40-hectare industrial park, and the first 7 2,000 square metre factories will be completed in February 2023. Now, the Managing Director, Sam Turnbull, who's been a strong advocate for modern training pathways, has said, and I quote, "The problem is that we cannot attract and train school leavers to learn how to run our robots and our CNC machines because TAFE does not have any robotic training. And while the local TAFE has perfectly functioning CNC machining centres, it's not running CNC courses." It is said that the reasons for this are there aren't enough teachers, there are not enough students, or that the machines are too old. Well, in fact, the machines, I understand, could be used. And there are not enough students because there are no courses. Here we can offer students an exciting and attractive career, interesting jobs, interesting training with jobs ready to go to. This would help solve the skills shortages in our regions. And yet, unfortunately, it's an issue that we need to address in terms of access to our regional TAFE. And as other speakers have said today, it's an important part of training in our regional locations where so often the other options are simply not available. So I think we need to take up the challenge to make sure that TAFE in our regions has the resources it needs to serve our young people, our workers and our communities, that it provides an avenue where people can seek an attractive career, that it can compete with the university sector so that young people know that this is an option for their futures and that they can pursue those options locally. And I commend the motion to the House.
I thank the member. I call the member for Ku-ring-gai.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I just say that I've been very impressed by the sincerity of the contributions this afternoon, other than, of course, the member for Newcastle. It's actually a very important topic. We all agree that TAFE is incredibly important. Skills training is incredibly important. And I actually wish to correct a few of the things, mostly from the member of Newcastle, that have been said, because there are many encouraging statistics in terms of the opportunities for regionally based students to access TAFE, and I think that that needs to be properly acknowledged. Obviously, more than 150,000 people from regional New South Wales actually were enrolled in TAFE courses last year, and unfortunately, all we get is the member for Newcastle and Labor talking down TAFE, talking down the hard-working teachers and the great students at TAFE. That's all. They have no policies about TAFE other than to talk down TAFE. And of course, we've heard this falsehood perpetrated by the member for Newcastle and the Teachers Federation about teachers being sacked. It is a matter of public record that in the last 6 years of annual reports by TAFE, Teacher numbers have increased year on year, every year for the last 6 annual reports. And if you look at, and the member for Newcastle talked about administrative staff. There are more administrative staff now in the last annual report than there were 6 years ago. So the problem is, don't let the facts get in the way. The member for Newcastle will never let the facts get in the way, unfortunately, for him. Now, in terms of accessibility in regional areas to skills and training, it's important to note that, as we announced this week, there have been more than 200,000 job trainer enrolments since that program, which gives free courses and skills training in New South Wales in under 2 years. And 90,000 of those have been outside of Sydney, delivered by TAFE New South Wales or registered training organisations. And that's focused on high demand skills sectors, as it should. There've been, and almost 60% of those 200,000 have been women. So in terms of equity and access to economic opportunity, that's incredibly important. Now, this government has invested $120 million in 22 regional connected learning centres, all in regional areas, and as the member for Northern Tablelands referred to. 19 of them have been opened, 3 are in progress. A number of those connected learning centres is the first presence ever of TAFE in that regional area, and they've also contributed in other areas to a doubling of the number of courses that have been available. This is an incredibly significant positive change for regional opportunity and regional students. Mobile training units now come in and offer a range of courses that were never available before, and the member for Barwon gave a very important contribution. He would acknowledge that, for example, in Wilcannia, there's now a Certificate 2 in hospitality. It's one of the most remote TAFE campuses in our state, and that's expanded the opportunity. Wilcannia only has a population of 549 people, but we're offering that course in that regional area. Now, there was a bit of a discussion about the importance and difficulties of digital connectivity. Our connected learning points have contributed to greater access to a whole range of subjects in regional areas. Students in Dubbo can participate in virtually delivered classes by lecturers on the Central Coast and so on. So this is very important. Now, the member for Newcastle talked about bricklaying between Newcastle and the Queensland border. Well, on my calculation, there are at least, I think, 7 places where you can study a Certificate 3 in bricklaying between Newcastle and Queensland. Northern Rivers, Coffs Harbour, New England, Tweed, Mid-North Coast, delivered by the Master Builders Association, G&L Marketing and Distributors, Construction Trade Qualifications. So he really needs to stop misleading the House and perpetuating these falsehoods about the availability of skills and training.
And I know the Leader of the House would expect me to pull him up. Member for Murray is seeking leave to contribute. Is leave granted? Yep. Leave is granted. Member for Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just would like to add to the debate a small section. So I rise to make a small contribution, and I have to say that I have taught in TAFE and am very keen on the institution of TAFE, and very, very important, particularly in country areas. But in 2012, the National Agreement opened up funding access to the private sector, which resulted in significant underfunding of TAFE, around 26% decline since 2004. And along with that growth of the private sector was a decline in the gutting of TAFE. So it isn't...
Member for Maitland, that your interjection was much worse than any of the others. So.
The private sector should complement TAFE, there's no doubt about that, but there are some unscrupulous people. So some of the problems that I've identified have been subcontracting and delivering of some of the courses to avoid oversight. This is by some of the private providers, and this is not. I am not having a go at TAFE at the moment, not yet. The delivery, and some of these private providers are delivering little or no training, and that's a fact. They often do not have premises, and their trainees, or trainers rather, are highly casualised, untrained workforce themselves. Private providers are making 30 cents in every dollar, and this is driven by profits and not what is best for the education of our young people. Now, I'm not saying all private providers, there are some very good ones, but there are some out there, which is the responsibility of the New South Wales Government to make sure that some of our young people aren't being ripped off. So their fees are also unregulated, unlike TAFE. This is a job for you, Minister, is to sort out. There has been significant growth in student loans. 80% of these loans go to private providers. Significant number of students who borrow to study at these facilities never finish their qualifications. That's a real concern. I believe that 80% of students will never complete their qualifications. 40% of those students will never earn enough to pay off those debts. So our young people are being ripped off, and this is your remit to sort out. They are. Some of these private providers are undermining the delivery of TAFE courses and the long-term viability of TAFE. This is what you should be looking at. I believe the privatisation of vocational training places has at times allowed for the unscrupulous growth of private providers. You do yours. The government needs to step up and make sure that our young people are not ripped off and that are well educated and are ready and prepared to work. Now, on another point, I did see the Minister regarding advertising in local papers for the TAFE courses because many people in my area are either lack digital connectivity to even search for the courses and are not digitally savvy. So I've asked for that small thing that would make an enormous difference is if you advertised in the Denny Pastoral Times, if you advertised in the Riverina Grazier, in the Griffith Area News, in the Leeton Irrigator, if you would open your pocket and advertise some of those people in the land. Some of those kids would then know what's going on. We are not all in the city. We are in the country, and we should govern responsibly for all of New South Wales, not just the city. Thank you.
I thank the member for Murray. I call the member for Orange in reply.
Yes, thank you, Mr Speaker, and I'd like to thank all the members who made a contribution to this public interest debate this afternoon. The member for Tweed Heads, Barwon, Northern Tablelands, Newcastle, Wagga Wagga, the Minister, the member for Ku-ring-gai, and also the member for Murray. I think, as I indicated when in the motion, this is especially relevant in relation to issues affecting regional and rural communities, especially the students in those TAFE facilities. And we've heard stories from a number of speakers in relation to students having to travel hundreds and hundreds of kilometres to access a course that's being offered in the particular area that they're interested in or employed in. The member for Barwon, who covers a huge area of the state, gave some fairly chilling statistics in relation to students having to travel 500 kilometres to Adelaide for hairdressing, 300 kilometres from Broken Hill to Mildura to do plumbing. I know there's a case where a young lad travels from Condobolin to Orange every 3 days a week to do his block, which is a distance of 400 kilometres per day or 200 kilometres each way. And these are generally young people, generally on their Ps if they've got a car. And as I said in my initial contribution, the rising cost of fuel, those issues are affecting the capacity that people have in terms of being able to drive these distances. This is really an issue about essentially the country not having the equivalent services as what there are in the city. We don't see people in the city having to travel 200 kilometres to access their closest TAFE facility to do the course they're employed in or studying. There's an inequity and an unfairness and a disadvantage that people in regional communities are facing in relation to these issues. And it's a really, really important debate, and that's why I brought this motion to the House. I heard the Minister talk about the connected learning centres. They should be a supplement, not a substitute, to TAFEs in regional communities. Sure, they're great in some settings, in some venues, and some courses. But the hands-on practical courses, and we're talking about a skills shortage and a trade shortage, and we want to rebuild the state after the floods and all the other the natural disasters. If you want to learn carpentry, mechanics, electrical, plumbing, welding, all those hands-on vocational careers, you need to have hands-on training, not learn over a computer screen or via the internet, and have the facilities in the classroom where you can do that. And that's why this motion is so important, and that's why I commend it to the House.
Thank you. The question is that the motion of the member for Orange be agreed to. All of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Thank you.